Hi, I'm Emma, and today Nadia and I will be discussing Alice Walker's novel, The Color Purple. Walker employs feminist criticism and African American criticism to further help the audience gain a deeper understanding of the struggles that occurred between 1910 and 1940. Celie and Nettie lived thousands of miles apart, yet they continuously faced the same struggles regarding racism and sexism. Racism and sexism are ingrained in society, so people will subconsciously fulfill these expectations. As a result, physical and mental abuse will occur during this time period.
A prime example of sexism is in Celie and Albert's marriage. On page 35, Albert says to Harpo, "Wives is like children, you have to let them know who got the upper hand. Nothing can do that better than a good sound beating." When Albert is comparing wives to children, he is making them seem inferior and implying that they can be ordered around by the dominant person, meaning the one with more power, which would be the husband in this case. Albert's mentality reflects on Celie's and Albert's marriage, as she is regularly beaten. Men such as Albert expect to be the dominant spouse in a marriage, and they think the only way to attain this status is by abusing their wives. This shows the lack of respect women receive in a marriage because of the society's expectations of how a man is supposed to treat his wife.
We see this mentality creating a line of abuse that is carried out in Sophia and Harpo's marriage. While Harpo and Celie are talking on page 36, he asks her what he ought to do to make her mind. She responds, "Beat her." Harpo takes her advice, but Sophia resists this oppression and beats Harpo back. Celie initially gives Harpo this advice because abuse is all she has been exposed to in her relationship with Albert. Sophia's response to Harpo's beating is not something that is expected for a woman to do, based on society's expectations, which are for a woman to silently take a beating. This exemplifies how Sophia defies society's expectations. Sophia is able to do this because of her strong personality. The cycle of Sophia and Harpo beating each other is created because Harpo follows an example from his father. Harpo expects a relationship like his father, where the man is dominant and the woman follows the man's orders and takes his beatings.
In Africa, Nettie also experiences sexism and sees how it is influencing the Olinka people. An Olinka mother says to Nettie, "A girl is nothing to herself, only to her husband can she become something." Through this quote, we can clearly see the role that women play in the Olinka society. Women's only significance is in relation to a man. Women do not have an identity of their own, which parallels to Celie society, where women are meant to exist just for men.
Sexism and racism sometimes pair up to negatively affect the woman of color in the novel. On page 85, while Sophia is out with her children, the mayor's white wife asks Sophia if she will be her maid. Sophia responds, "Hell no." The mayor then intervenes and slaps Sophia. Quote, "Sophia knocked the man down." The police end up beating Sophia and taking her away to jail. Had Sophia not been a black woman, she wouldn't have been asked to be a maid in the first place. She responds in a way that is not appropriate in her society, and as a result, she is abused. She not only got sent to prison for many years, she ended up as a maid for a white woman. This reveals that only after one act of violence towards a white person, a person of color will forever be in debt to them, as Sophia is to Mrs. Millie.
When Celie first reads Nettie's letters, Nettie explains how Africans stole us because they love money more than their own sisters and brothers, showing how they are considered inferior and forced to work. For so long, Celie and Nettie have lived in ignorance about how they ended up in the positions that they are in, Celie being a child wife and abiding to whatever Albert says and not knowing why she is forced to do this, Nettie starting in the same position as Celie.
African American criticism is also seen when Celie explains to Shug her idea of what God looks like in her eyes. Celie explains that, quote, "He big and old and tall and gray, bearded and white," page 194. The fact that Celie imagines God as a white man exhibits that because white people are considered the dominant race, this mentality is not only practiced in everyday life, shown by Sophia's example when she is beaten up by a white man, but it is ingrained in religious and spiritual beliefs as well. Celia envisions this idea of God being a person who in her life would act as her oppressor, a white man. Shug attempts to explain to her that God isn't a person, but a being that is interpreted differently in everyone's eyes. Celia then discards her view of God and changes her interpretation. She realizes that white people have deprived her of so much, and she didn't want this version of God to consume her spiritual life as well.
Through African American criticism and feminist criticism, we are able to further understand the struggles Celia has gone through as a Black woman living in the South and born into abuse. We can see the cycles of abuse that occur throughout generations when we see Celia and Albert's relationship, which influences Sophia and Harpo's marriage. The audience can also see discrimination and lack of freedom that Sophia encounters when she stands up to a white man just one time. We can interpret the parallels between Celia and Nettie's worlds as they live thousands of miles apart but encounter the same struggles as women during this time period. Racism and sexism affect the characters in The Color Purple both externally and internally. Internal struggles occur when Albert verbally abuses Celia, and externally when evident physical abuse that occurs throughout their marriage. Because of these struggles, we are able to see the evolution of characters' maturity and the independence that the women gain as a result.